Good evening, everyone. Psych, it's not actually evening, it's the middle of the day, which means that ambulances and airplanes and loud children are looming outside. I hope they don't manage to ruin the audio of this video. But before I get to the topic, if you are unaware of the strangeness that is unfolding right now around the character of Fahkumram, then I really suggest you watch the two videos that I will link in the description of this one. It's basically a compilation in two parts by a South Korean content creator, and it contains all the hitbox issues and bugs that he's found with the character so far. Now, I've been told by many sources that this is not everything, but there's a lot in there. I've been focusing so much on improving my Eliza lately that I was only really aware of the issues that happen in her matchup with Fahkumram, but when I watched this video, I actually said wow out loud because I realized that it's a much bigger problem than I thought. And I think it's important to have that stuff for context when we talk about this issue. But what we're looking at right now is a quote by Arslan Ash, and you might call me sheepish for leaning on the opinions of others again, but I made a promise, remember, not to get upset about bad balancing in Tekken anymore, and since I managed that, I've actually been doing better in the game and enjoying the game more, and I think my content has also had a more positive texture to it, which I have really enjoyed. So I will talk about this because it's a general big issue in the Tekken world right now, but I will add my own opinion more as an afterthought. But Arslan Ash is saying here that him and his team consider Fahkumram to be the best character in this game right now, and they go as far as using the word overpowered. And Arslan then followed this tweet up with another one where he listed his top 5 characters in the game, and unsurprisingly, Fahkumram was at the #1 spot on that list. And then something really interesting happened, because another player, I think it was Super Akuma, asked as a response to that, would you still think that he was #1 if he didn't have all these weird hitbox issues and bugs? And that's a very good question, and one that I want to break down and analyze a little bit here. My own personal answer to that would probably be yes. I think that there are severe balance issues with Fahkumram even if he didn't have these issues, but the reasons are really quite interesting, so let's talk a little bit about it. The first thing I want to bring up with Fahkumram, and it's the easiest to understand and digest and adjust if you wanted to adjust it, is damage. Fahkumram deals extremely high damage. We've seen constant damage power creep across the lifespan of Tekken 7, and so the latest characters to come out sometimes have the most insane damage. It's just a trend with the game. And I don't think high damage in itself is a huge issue, but it's more like if there are other issues going on with a character's balancing, then high damage tends to amplify all of them and make them even more problematic. Chloe and Marduk deal some insanely high damage, but those characters aren't considered overpowered because they have other weaknesses and they struggle in other areas. I think another good example is Katarina deals extremely high damage, but because her moves are generally quite bad, she doesn't deal that damage and it doesn't become an issue. But when you have a character who's very good at dealing his damage, like Fahkumram, the fact that the damage is so high just becomes more and more of an issue. And so the way to fix the character or adjust him, I mean, you definitely cannot solve the issue by decreasing the damage, but it's at least a step in the right direction. The next thing I want to talk about is range, and this is an interesting thing. This is where the issue of Fahkumram's tallness, the size of his character model, starts to come into the picture, and this is where it gets, like I said, interesting in my opinion. But this character has some extreme range, even from full screen. When you're spaced out very far, he feels extremely dangerous. He can close the gap in very dangerous ways. Forward 1+2, the safe wall bounce move that hits from like full screen. His slash kick, you know, the running knee, is very, very good. It's very oppressive. Basically fills the role of a really good, fast hitbox running 2 for many characters, but it's a mid and it jumps, you know, very fast, very far. His back one, I think, is that go-to with Punisher where you collect a guaranteed forward 2-1 on hit and so on. Very, very good stuff, but it gets even worse, much worse in my opinion, when you are playing against Fahkumram in the mid-range, because he can keep you at a range, especially with his very long legs and his strings, where he can constantly oppress and lock you down, but you can't really retaliate or reach him in return. And so it becomes very, very claustrophobic. It's like being slapped by a constant barrage of tentacles almost. It's very, very uncomfortable to play against. Another issue that it creates, and I appreciate the fact that this is a very fringe issue that only really matters if you're playing certain characters, but there are characters in this game who like to jump, who jump back, who do dive kicks. You know, I play Eliza, for example, and that is almost completely neutralized by Fahkumram with his really long legs. His kicking attacks and strings reach so far across the screen, but also so far from top to bottom on the screen that he can swat you out of the air like a fly. And so he's basically one of the few characters in the game who, just by the virtue of the fact that his character model is so large, has consistent anti-air. And so he's by far one of Elisa's worst matchups. It doesn't help that her recent big buff, Moonglide 4 into Guaranteed Quarter Back 2, simply doesn't work on Fahkumram because for some reason his head doesn't seem to have a hurt box. It's very strange. Another issue that I want to talk about a little bit, well, it might not be an issue, it's just a point to bring up, depending on how you look at it, but popularity is another thing. And so the example I want to bring up here is Akuma. Akuma is another extremely powerful character in this game, to the point where it becomes really quite chaotic. And if you have the execution and you do the right things, I think it becomes the best character in the game, possibly. Even at the highest level of competitive play. But Akuma is not a commonly used character, and so it doesn't become as much of an issue. If you go online, you might run into 1 or 2 Akumas per week, and so it sort of gets brushed aside. But I think if Akuma had easier execution and you played, you know, multiple Akumas every time you went online, this character would have been rebalanced a long time ago, because there would be constant outcry for that to happen from the community. Fahkumram does not have low popularity. In fact, I decided to compile a list of players currently using Fahkumram online, and as you can see, there are quite a few of them, and that means that these issues, they tend to come up over and over and over when you play online, and so they become more oppressive, they stand out, and it becomes less comfortable to play online Tekken. I want to wrap back to some of these hitbox issues because I think it's a fascinating thing that we haven't really seen in Tekken so far, to an extent with the bears, but not really. I want to talk about why I think a lot of this stuff is happening. Let's just mention a couple of the strange things. For example, he can neutral jump over overhead mids like Hammer the Gods. He can sidestep things that only other characters who specialize in sidestepping like Elisa and Lily can sidestep. His sidestep seems to be, in some cases, better than Zafina, which is kind of crazy. But another really weird thing is that Fahkumram seems to be pushed back more by moves than other characters. So you know about pushback moves, you get hit and then, or you block and then you get pushed back. That is usually a property of the move, not a property of the character that the move connects with. So a very good example that you can check out is Kazumi's while standing 4-4, which is her tsunami kicks, her most important while standing Punisher. A classic setup with that character is she does the while standing 4-4 and then she goes into a counter hit back 4. It sets that up. When Fahkumram gets hit by while standing 4-4 from Kazumi, he just gets pushed back so far that Kazumi is not in range for any of her moves. So she can't capitalize at all with any follow-ups for hitting with that Punisher. Another weird one I saw is that Paul can't do backswing blow into guaranteed death fist on him, which he can do on a bunch of other characters. And again, those videos in the description are very good because the person who made them, he shows that, okay, this works on Xiao Yu, so very small characters. It works on Gigas and Bears, so very big characters, but it just doesn't work on Fahkumram. Like, Devil Jin can't even get Steel Pedal at the wall after a single hit Hell Sweep. All of these like typical classic setups that you see all the time, they just break down when you're playing against this character. So if we go back and look at a lot of the early promotional footage for the character and the trailers, I mean, people have memed on it, but the size of this character seemed to change several times during his development. It's very clear that they wanted to make a very large, imposing character. That was supposed to be, you know, one of the USPs of this character, which is a cool idea. And then they probably realized that created all kinds of issues in terms of consistency in the game, and that's probably why they started to adjust his size, and they ended up with the size he is at right now. My guess is that the reason his head cannot be connected with, or that some attacks just melt through his legs when he's in the air, is that they had to make him be pushed back further away by moves to make it look natural when he has such a big body. But then they also had to reduce some parts of the of his hurt box to sort of make that make sense in terms of animations. It's kind of difficult to explain, but if you look at that video and you try it out yourself, you'll sort of see what I mean. It's very, very weird. And so this creates such a unique issue because, okay, for example, if we compare him to Leroy, Leroy came out and was an overpowered character, but almost all the issues with Leroy had to do with frame data. Everything just wasn't minus enough on block, and then they adjusted his frame data and brought it way down. They changed a couple of, you know, moves in terms of range and stuff like that, but the frame data was the main thing. And now Leroy is still a strong but fairly balanced character, and he enjoys the same level of popularity as your average popular character as far as I can tell. So I think that the rebalancing of Leroy is actually a huge success. But with Fahkumram, the issue is not with frame data, although he does have issues with his frame data as well. But the frame data is honestly kind of balanced, which is why when we made those early podcasts and we were talking about the character, we were like, no, he seems fine, he seems balanced. And that's because on paper he does. But then the range comes into the picture, the character model comes into the picture, and the strangeness begins. And I think fixing this is going to be very, very difficult if they have a mind to fix it, because they have mocap people come in and do these animations. They can't really remake them that easily. It's very, very hard. And the range and the hurtbox of the character needs to be consistent with his character model to some extent, because that's how Tekken works. That's how character models should always work in Tekken. And so the only real way I can see of fixing a lot of this would be to shrink the character, to give him a more consistent, more typical character model size, and then just shrink him down to that and make the hurtbox consistent with his actual size. But that is a very weird thing to do, and something that I'm not sure that Namco are prepared to do. You know, it would be memed on so hard if the character were suddenly to shrink, you know. But I would honestly be very happy with that solution, because it seems to be the healthiest way of fixing what is going on. I mean, what else could they do? If they try to change the range and the hurt boxes and the hit boxes, then they're not going to be consistent with the character model anymore, even though they're not right now, and it might just lead to more strangeness. The character just has to be smaller, I think. And you might bring up Kuma as an example of, you know, this already exists in the game and it's been an issue with other characters. And I think, yeah, if Kuma came out today, people would be upset about that as well. We've been playing against Kuma for a long time, so we're sort of used to it. We know how to modify our combos. But again, those videos in the description will show you that this is a much, much bigger issue than Kuma. The inconsistencies are wild, and they're not like those of Kuma or characters that have small legs. It's an issue of, you know, moves, like I said, just melting through and not even connecting with the opponent character, and classic important setups and combos just simply not working. My guess is that if the tournament scene was alive and well right now and tournaments were happening, this character would enjoy universal popularity. I think we would see Fahkumram in every top 8, several Fahkumrams in top 8. It's the kind of strength and the kind of power that really works at a tournament level as well. So he would basically be what Leroy was pre-nerf. And if that were happening, I think the issue would, you know, get even more attention, and maybe the road to readjusting the character would be shorter. Evo is apparently going to be held online. That's going to be interesting, but trust me, Fahkumram is going to show up in that tournament. It's very interesting, and those are my thoughts on the issue. I'm very interested to hear yours. It's weird, and the character is so popular online right now that it just becomes pretty egregious and oppressive, but there you go. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys again very soon.